Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Global AI Leader Series webinar number 3. Today we have with us a view from UAE, where we will talk about topics ranging from open source AI issues to building an ecosystem around AI, but also to national adaptation and national AI strategies and what it means for innovation and business. And we'll see, of course, also what's happening in the space of AI in the UAE. I'm Theos Evgeniou, professor at INSEAD, and I'll be your guest today. Next slide. Please don't forget that there are a few more webinars coming in the series. Starting next week, we have on June 12, the webinar on augmenting people and organizations with AI, where we will discuss both about augmentation of individuals, but also companies with the president of Exobionics and also INSEAD board member, Chu Fum Lin, and Francois Candelon, who was the head of BCG Henderson Institute and now a partner at PE firm 72. And then we'll have 3 more coming up later. You can register for each of them separately. Next slide, please. Before we continue, the usual webinar etiquette. You are muted with videos off, chat is closed. For questions, please use the Q&A. And you can kind of rate questions there, so we can see the ones that are highest of most interest to discuss. You can vote them. The webinar will be recorded, and for any technical issues, please email digital@insead.edu. Before we get Reda and Merouane online, let me just do a quick poll, which is an interesting question regarding AI and language. Do you believe that English language LLMs will become more powerful than non-English language and give an advantage to English-speaking cultures? Yes or no? Curious what you think. Also relates to a topic that Cedric O mentioned in the previous webinar series around the impact of large language models on the culture in general. For those of you who missed it, all the webinars are recorded. Let's see if we can see the answers. Are we there? Yes, 75%, 25%. That's a pretty big majority. So indeed, this is something that maybe we want to all keep in mind and consider. So the majority from you are thinking that indeed the English language LLMs will become more powerful. We all know that the big players, the big tech, are all in the US. And the more interesting part also is that it will give an advantage, and it will give an advantage to English-speaking cultures. Let's see how this plays out. That's we of course we want the AI to be powerful everywhere, obviously, and especially as INSEAD, the global school for the world. We want to make sure the whole world is of course powerful. That's also part of the reason why the webinar series goes around the world. Next slide, please. So I'd like to welcome our guest today, Merouane Debbah, who is a senior AI advisor at Technology Innovation Institute, TII, in UAE. Merouane, welcome and thank you for joining us. And Reda Nidhakou, who is the acting CEO, VentureOne, at the Abu Dhabi Advanced Technology Research Council, and also the active CEO of AI71, a company that relates to what Merouane is doing. Merouane has been involved from the beginning the development of one of the most famous, powerful LLMs in the world called Falcon, that many of you may have used. And if not, I mean, definitely take a look. Merouane, Reda, welcome. Maybe you give us a brief intro on yourself, and then I'll dive in immediately to the first question. Merouane, let's start from you about yourself.
Well, thank you again for this opportunity, and especially I would like to thank INSEAD for giving us an opportunity to present basically the work that we're doing here in the Middle East. I think these last 3 years have been quite outstanding in the progress of the AI, I would say, ecosystem that we've been building. And I'm happy to share basically what we've been doing in the last 3 years.
Thank you, Merouane. Reda, welcome. Something on your role intro?
Yes, same here. Very happy to be a part of this webinar and to share our perspectives from Abu Dhabi on the topic. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think you did a good job introducing us, so I won't repeat what you said.
Thank you, Reda. So let me dive in directly to one question. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, for those who just joined, in this webinar, we'll cover topics ranging from open source AI to AI safety, but also national AI strategies and ecosystem building around AI, which is one of the topics around Falcon and AI 71, and what's happening in the UAE. So let me start from the big elephant in the room that everybody's interested in. There is a lot of discussion about this on social media, on the internet. There are articles written, there is opinions, very strong opinions sometimes, for, against, why do open source AI? This is very dangerous, existential risks, kind of, some people say. So elephant in the room is the following for both of you, Merouane and Reda. Maybe we can start with you, Merouane. Are there any valid or less valid or maybe invalid safety concerns with powerful open source AI models?
So that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. And we're seeing a lot of debate or today between people who are, of course, claiming that open source can have, of course, some disadvantages. I think that the safety and security related to AI technology is, first of all, a valid question. And of course, it concerns all the new technologies that we're building. So AI is not an exception. The focus, of course, for us is to build better, responsible, secure, and of course, transparent AI models. Now, the question that people are asking can be also returned in some way to also the closed source AI models, because both of them have, in terms of lack of transparency, also a bit of safety issues. I think the open source realm, as far as we're concerned here with our point of view, of course, provides the benefit to, of course, open the code, open the weights, look at the details around those things, and be able, of course, to improve the system with the community around. And I think the fact that there's a community, and we've been seeing it also for other domains, which is the software domain, the classical Linux and other domain, and we'll talk about that with what we did with the foundation, are very, I would say, important for us to have a community, and that the community is improving constantly these models. So from our point of view, on the contrary, open source is giving the realm to empower a lot of people to be able, of course, to use, to criticize, and to improve the systems. And we are very, of course, trustworthy of all this community, which is challenging us on basically the performance and the safety concerns that people are raising.
So you get more challenges coming from the community. Just quickly for the audience, you mentioned open weights, open code. Maybe you can clarify a bit when we say open source AI, it's not just one thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't want to get into the details, but open source is still not defined, I would say, accurately within the, I would say, the LLM realm. Depending on which company you come from, on basically the kind of category of person, researchers you come from, there's different definitions. You have, of course, people who decide that open source relate to the fact that you open the data, you open basically the code, you open the weights, you open basically also release the papers with a full description. And as of today, the majority are within a realm of, I would say, gray zone, where open source is related to the fact that you release the weights to the community so they can use it, but they don't release the code as of today. And this is where basically some people have a bit of concern, but this revolves with the fact that there's some work to be done on defining what is open source. So we worked at TII with a group, Columbia group, a couple of months ago. We released a recent paper with top players in the domain in terms of trying to refine and narrow down basically what we think are the definition of open source. But for the public, open source is not as defined clearly as it is in the other domains of software, because depending on the companies, institutions, some will release everything, others will just release the weights. There is a consensus today of just releasing what we call the weights of the models, which enables you, of course, to do what we call some kind of refinement and some fine-tuning.
So in Falcon, what for you, what does open source mean for Falcon?
So for us, we go in the weights. So we've been releasing the weights, providing the community, of course, to improve on top of that, but just the rate, not the code source.
Sounds good. Reda, any comments on this question about this debate online between closed, open source, safety, or anything around safety of AI? How you think about this as challenge or even opportunity potential for differentiation?
Well, I fully agree with Professor Merouane. I would argue that, if anything, open source provides more visibility and control to the end users for them to basically deploy the way they want, and also deploy the relevant safety and security measures around their models. I think consuming a closed source model comes also with a lot of risks related to control and specifically data, because these models don't operate in silo, they operate in conjunction with end users' data. They interact with end users' data in the applications, and this is where there are other risks related to exposing the end users' data. Now, as any technology, of course, in AI in general, there are relevant safety concerns. And the reason they are more advertised in AI is that in AI, there are two specificities. The first one is we still lack control of this technology. We don't really understand how it works. We are used as humans to technologies that we deploy and we can predict the output of the technology. 1 + 1 is equal to. In AI today, there is less of that, and this what makes us actually more concerned about the safety aspect of it and so on. Second is the fast pace that AI is taking. It's evolving in an exponential speed that actually brings concerns into how fast can actually safety and security developments keep up with the AI developments. So I think these are two specificities that make AI safety concerns more prominent when it comes to AI. Now, does it mean we shouldn't adopt AI? Not at all. I think, if anything, we need to double down into safety and security developments within the models, but also outside the models, adding layers. And I think open source actually allows these developments and allows these integrations to happen.
Thanks, Reda. Maybe we'll come back to how we do this later on when we discuss a bit about the kind of research you are also doing at TII and also elsewhere around safety and other topics. Let's go back a little bit also for the audience and for all of us to learn about the UAE's, well, both the Falcon story and the UAE story in AI. I mean, I must say that all of us have been impressed about how such a powerful model came out from UAE, competing with like some of the best models in the world, some of the best models coming from from the Valley and from the top places in the US. You've done an amazing job. So Merouane, you've been like instrumental in building these models, the first Falcon models. Maybe you give us a bit of a history of where did it start, why did it start, how did it start, what was the team, what kind of talent you needed, what were some challenges early on to build these kind of models as you were there closely from day one.
Okay, so that's a very good and valid point. I think for the audience, many do not know, but the UAE has embraced basically AI at a very early stage and much before Falcon. So already in 2017, we had the first minister of AI in the world, which was a big thing when you compare to how the leadership here was very basically visionary in seeing the potential of AI. Second step that we did is implement a university dedicated to AI. It's called the MBZ UAI University. That was also a very important step in terms of building also the vision, in terms of training the next generation talents. And from there, of course, the next step that we decided to do is construct basically an R&D center dedicated basically to AI. That was started in 2021. I was leading it at that time. And one of the first things that we decided to do in building that research center is on two things. First is finding basically the tools to start, leveraging the data of the different, I would say, verticals, which were in the UAE, and especially in the Technology Innovation Institute, which is today a research center with more than 1,200 researchers working on 10 different domains, which are related, and I will not mention all of them, but let's say biotech, energy, and others. And it was extremely important to develop already some kind of baseline platform to support those different centers to bring value in the kind of work and data that they were crashing. But one of the things also that we wanted to focus is also to develop some capability within the UAE in empowering us with the capability of developing some breakthrough technologies related to AI. We started, of course, working on LLM at that time and developing what we call Noor, which was the first largest language model in Arabic with 10 billion parameters. That was an exercise for us. It was an exercise because the learning experience with Arabic was instrumental in building the Falcon. Why? Because first of all, in Arabic in general, data is key. And data, there's not so much, so you need to extract as much as you can from the data. And that was very important on a learning experience. And I'll talk about it in terms of how we came up with a new data set that we developed, which is open source and now distributed. It's called the Refined Web Data Set for Falcon, which was at the heart of building our model in terms of how we cleaned it, how we were able, of course, to get the maximum that we could get. The second thing also was an exercise in building the team in terms of capability in large language models. And so that was I would say, a warm-up. We were quite happy. That took us a couple of months to build Noor. And from that, we decided, of course, to go to the next big leap in terms of challenge, in terms of building one of the largest language model in the market that we could do with 180 billion parameters. So that was one of our focus that we decided early 2022. And we kickstarted that work in terms of building that 180B model. We had some, of course, will to be one of the most, I would say, top-ranked models. Although we'll talk about it, we turned out to be top-ranked one. That was a bit of a surprise for us, but we were extremely happy. But within that range of developing that model, of course, that helped us to increase the team, understanding also what was important in building those models. And I think one of the key things that people learned also for us is that the quality of the data set was key in the success of Falcon. And we're seeing also, by the way, this year, a lot of those models being built, and they're built because of the quality of that data set. And then, of course, working on the two other things which are important, meaning basically the kind of compute that is required. So we built up our own compute capability for that. And we decided to launch the Falcon 180B. When we launched the one Falcon ATB, took us a bit of 1 year to build it. We had what we call a checkpoint. The checkpoint was basically a 40B model. We decided, of course, to release the checkpoint 40B model as an open source early 2023, and it was ranked top 1 on Hugging Face in terms of ranking, and we're extremely proud of that result. A couple of months ago, we finished basically the 180B, and the success came again in September. Basically, we also released the basically 180B, and it was top ranked. What's interesting is that, of course, that work is continuing today, and where basically our team has been working drastically and intensively in releasing a new version, basically, of Falcon called the Falcon, basically, 11B that we released a couple of weeks ago, and was also within the top models of small number of parameters. It's an 11B with also multimodality capability, and that was also a big, of course, kind of testament of the kind of work that the teams are doing here within TII. In terms of resources, of course, we're mixing what people are mixing. First, the scale of the compute, understanding how this compute is being used. We trained Falcon 180B on 4,000 GPU A100. That's a bit of an art in how you train those models, and it's extremely difficult because you have a lot of challenges when these GPUs burn. Then you have to rerun those things. You have to build, of course, the set of teams, which are alignment teams, data set teams, people who do basically also the checks, the people who do, of course, the building of the transformer. That also required a kind of work, and that was, of course, was enabled thanks to a team that we have of diversified culture, which was working on the different things that we've been building. So that gives a bit of a sense of the last 2 years on how far we've been going. And I think the release of the Falcon 2 a couple of weeks ago showcased also basically our will to continue that story and how far we're going at the moment. I have to admit that now, of course, we are building more and more models which have capability of running on a small set of GPUs. Our experience of understanding of building large language models with huge number of parameters turned out that a lot of people in terms of usage want to be able to run those models basically within a computer and not in a cluster. So that was a good thing. I just want to finish by one point on that, and I'll give the floor also to Reda. Of course, our understanding of Falcon turned out also very important for us in terms of building it to understand also the community that we are reaching. And for that, of course, we had committed at the beginning in terms of open sourcing Falcon immediately. And that was very important for us to touch as much as we could the number of people, empowering those people, of course, in terms of developing use cases around those things. And second, also, in terms of understanding that our experience of compute, of how to build it, required also that we are also open in supporting other communities in terms of our building. And we built on top of that, I think it's quite unique in the world today. what we call a Falcon Foundation. I'll talk about it afterwards when we finish, which basically is at the heart of a new, I would say, scheme in terms of open source, but empowering also community to work with us around Falcon.
So we'll come back to this later, the ecosystem you are building and the strategy you are following, also as a business. And I'll come to this, Reda, to you. Quick question, Merouane. You've been the head of the research center there from the beginning of this Falcon story that you mentioned. And you mentioned you had like a team doing the alignment, a team doing the checkpoints, a team doing the compute, a team doing the data, and a team doing probably the transformers. So out of those 5 things, whatever it is, 5, 6 things, what percentage of the whole team was, kind of between those 5 areas? I don't know how many people were involved in Falcon and how many of those are in each of those 5 areas roughly, right?
Yeah, so as of today, the team that we have around TII working on Falcon is roughly around 80 people, which is a quite huge number. Roughly all the different steps are important. In general, these are all teams of 5 to 7 people. They're quite importantly working in different domains. And each step turned out to be very important because each of these steps is quite instrumental in having a model which can be ranked in the top ones.
Yeah, very interesting. I'd love to know more about, whether transformers are anything special, because your transformers must be the same as OpenAI or anybody else's transformers. I assume there is nothing new here, but I guess lots of innovation comes also from the data side, right? And the compute.
So what we learned, and that's not exactly just only us. So when we started Falcon, of course, we were in the range of saying we're going to just build the biggest model with the 500 billion parameters. But at the moment when we started to build, there was a very interesting paper which is quite known in the community of Kaplan et al., which was saying basically that to build a good model, you have 3 factors: the size of your model, which is the number of parameters or the number of neurons. The second is, of course, the quality and the size of your data set. And the third one is also how many times basically you train your model, the number of epochs. Which, to give an example to the people who are not familiar with LLMs, when you have a kid and you want to make a kid, let's say, smart, although smartness is not the right term, there's 3 factors. First, his brain size has to be big enough. So it's not the same thing as training a kid of 2 years old than a kid of 9, 10 years old because of the number of neurons he has in his brain. Second is the number of books he reads and the quality of those books. If you give him a lot of books, but they're random, he's not going to be learning anything. If you give him just a couple of books, but not enough, he's not going to learn also a lot of things. And the third one is how many times he reads those books. So if you read one time the book, it's not at the same time as if you revise and you learn those books. So the number of epochs. And by playing smartly with these 3, I would say, parameters, you can build up models with less parameters, but extremely good in terms of performance by playing on other factors, which is the number of epochs. I think that was the key for us in how we succeeded.
Thanks, Merouane. We may come back to these research topics, technical topics later on. Reda, quick question to you. This is all research, fantastic stuff, but eventually there was a decision to make to build AI-71. Can you tell us a bit about AI-71 first of all, and how this fits to the story that Merouane just said? Why you built it? What's the vision? What you want to achieve? And how does it fit within the UAE's AI strategy and ecosystem in general?
Sure. I think maybe before deep diving into AI-71, let me just comment and complement some of what Professor Merouane was saying. I don't think everyone realizes how unique this era is for a country like the UAE and Abu Dhabi. Today, there is a technology like Falcon that is competing with global technologies in a topic of today that is coming out of the UAE. This is really something unique that we've witnessed, we are witnessing, and we are doubling down as an organization within ATRC, TII, AI-71, and so on. But we are actually following an overall movement here in Abu Dhabi and the UAE. If we step back, the UAE as a country have kind of missed the Web 1.0 wave. The country was too young. It was building its basic infrastructure and so on and so forth. Then came Web 2.0, where the country has actually adopted quite well the Web 2.0 solutions, whether it's applications and so on and so forth. I think the UAE has been in the front of being an adopter of the web and the applications and so on and so forth. In the Web 3.0 and AI, I think the UAE is definitely determined to play a driver role. And the reason I'm giving this context is what we are doing in TII and AI-71 is nothing but actually a piece in a bigger puzzle. Merouane has mentioned the AI university, the AI ministry, but these are only other components. In reality, the country is also investing in compute. The country is also mobilizing different government entities to actually embrace AI, actually prepare their data for AI, and so on and so forth. So in this context, within TII, as Professor Merouane mentioned, there was actually first a decision to set up a dedicated AI team. This was the first decision. The second decision, and I'm sure you're familiar with our model, where we are an applied research center that only works on research that is actually lined up to a customer, to a specific customer use case. In this instance, for the large language model, this was actually one of our moonshot projects. It was one of our bets that did not necessarily have a clear use case back then, but this was a bet that was, again, in the context of the country wanting to double down in AI. After the success that Merouane, actually the surprising success that Merouane has explained after putting the Falcon open source, we realized that we actually have an edge and all the stars are aligning. We are in a context of a country that wants to double down in AI and that is putting all the ingredients necessary for AI. We have built a strong team that has demonstrated its technical capability by putting out there a model that's competing with the big giants. So what we decided is actually to create now a local champion that can take this model from a technical solution to actually an operational solution that is useful on the ground. And what we did actually, this helped us also separate our research efforts that are open source and so on from our commercial and use case oriented efforts. And what we did in the beginning is we defined what are the key sectors that matter for Abu Dhabi and where AI can play a role. These were healthcare, education, justice, and so on. And we right away started actually developing solutions on top of Falcon to cater for these domains. So basically, what I want to say is AI 71 is an initiative from within Abu Dhabi that actually fits in a broader strategy and the broader movement towards AI. We are very glad to actually be part of this, be a key contributor, but also actually to see magazines like The Economist positioning the UAE as one of the top 3 AI powers in the world, alongside US and China. This is for us a huge testimony of the efforts that are being done, and we are conscious that we are playing a key role there.
And it's interesting you say this is also something observed at the level of organizations, that becoming a leader in AI is easier if you have been already advanced in previous digital technology adoptions and digital transformation. So the more advanced you are in adoption of big data or adoption of digital transformation, the easier it is to become also advanced, even more advanced on AI. And that's something which we see at the country level, which is very, very interesting to see, at the country level, something that has been observed at the company level. Now, this is impressive what you are doing, but the natural question now is, okay, you reached here, how do you compete? Because this may be also a little bit like a winner take all, or maybe concentrated markets. I mean, maybe there will be only a few kind of AI models, foundation models out there. What's a strategy, given you have an open source approach? How does an open source AI business competes, and what's the strategy for this, and what's different between what you do and what other big players do? Mistral, OpenAI, Gemini, you name it, right? Meta. I don't know who wants to take this question first.
I'll go first, and then I'll let Professor Merouane complete on more the technical side. I think I'd like to look at it with 2 lenses. As I said before, we've differentiated our research model efforts from our commercial efforts. I think there is a common layer between the 2, which is collaboration and talent. I think we are blessed to be in a place in the world that can easily attract the best talent in the world. And this is key. The second one is the ability to collaborate and open collaborations with different types of stakeholders, whether it's end user, infrastructure players, data providers, and so on and so forth. On the model side, and I'll let Professor Merouane explain it more, one of the decisions that were made is the creation of Falcon Foundation. We've realized that there is only much we can do by ourselves. We've already demonstrated we have a great team, we can punch way above our weight, but yet we realized that only by gathering other stakeholders around the table with us and have them contribute to Falcon, we can really keep competing and keep actually bringing to the open source community one of the most powerful models out there. This is from a model perspective, and I'll let Professor Merouane after deep dive in that. Now, from a commercial perspective, I think the key there is really to do this in collaboration and in a close coordination with end users. At the end of the day, I don't think there is a room for generic solutions that cater for every single use case. In reality, because data is at the heart of the success of AI solutions, and because building AI solutions and running AI solutions can be expensive, it only makes sense if it solves a specific problem statement or if it unlocks a new business and new value opportunity. So what we are doing from an AI-71 perspective is working super closely with the end users, whether it's in the healthcare system, whether it's in the education ecosystem, the justice ecosystem, and so on. In each of these fields, we are working hands on hand with the relevant stakeholders there, whether it's industry, regulators, government, and so on, to actually build solutions that make impact. Because unless your solutions make impact today, I think there will be many companies that will die simply because their solutions don't add that layer of value.
So there is some strategy of collaboration across from all the way from model development and the foundation, the Falcon foundations. Maybe we'll get into the Falcon foundation in a second, Merouane, all the way to the end users, focusing on specific use cases. And from what I understand, you have like 3 areas you are focusing on. I don't know if you expand that: the law, education, and healthcare. It's interesting strategy to focus on areas. Is there more one? Maybe there's another one.
Yeah, we're actually focusing on more. So first, we are building a layer of what we call productivity tools with an emphasis on government services. So automating government services is something that we're focusing on. This is our first vertical. Then we are actually creating a number of other verticals. The first one we've addressed are in fact healthcare, justice, and education, but we are also now building solutions around construction, solutions around security, and so on and so forth. So the list is long, but we are taking it step by step and deep diving with these stakeholders into their respective ecosystems.
Which is not something we've seen neither with, from what I know, maybe I'm wrong here, neither with OpenAI nor with Mistral, for example, right? I don't know what's your take on this? Is it different, you think, from what everybody else is following, or?
Yeah, we are actually not in the business of selling an API. We provide an API just simply to empower developers who want to use the base Falcon, but this is not our focus. While others are focusing on selling the API, we're actually building powerful models that we're putting open source. And on the other side, we are building impactful solutions, applications.
Verticals, basically, you focus on verticals. Merouane, something to say on the building of the community? The Falcon, first of all, what's the Falcon Foundation for the audience? What's the idea there, and how do you build a community around this? So what are the challenges, and where are you right now? How far?
Yeah, as Reda was speaking, we're building here sort of a rocket with the foundation, and I'll talk about it. And then, of course, the other pieces on which basically Reda is instrumental in building it to make the full rocket basically work as it should. On the foundation, what we immediately analyzed is that large language models will be the next generation operating system of the Internet of Intelligence. And we're quite confident in that. And from that, what we realized is that we can make a parallel on how what we call operating systems were built before, Android, Linux, and others like that. We think today there's going to be consolidation of the market. What we mean is that it's not sustainable today on the number of companies which are building what we call foundational models, just because training them costs a lot of money, upgrading them costs a lot of money, porting them in different type of terminals, meaning on a computer, then on a device, which means that you need to shrink in terms of model size, and that will cost a lot of money. So there's going to be consolidation, 5, 10, we don't know how many, but there's going to be that consolidation of the market. Within that consolidation of market, on the open source, what we think is that the Linux model turned out to be extremely good. And our idea is to say the following, that we don't think that one company, one institution should be behind building Falcon. What we want basically is that, of course, TII is the main contributor in terms of empowering Falcon, but we want also a whole community to build it. Why? Because at the moment that people use it, well, they know the problems when they use it, and they're willing also to contribute by being a member of the community. So we decided to basically push Falcon within something called the Falcon Foundation, where TII has been a main contributor by putting basically an endowment of $300 million in that foundation that was announced in the World Government Summit last February, and in which basically it's a shared basically model where we have many institutions which are belonging to that foundation, and they're deciding on basically the future decisions on how it should be shaped because they are users of that. And we think that the Linux model and the Falcon Foundation was basically a bit made in the same realm, is one of the few models which we think make sense in how to make this model sustainable for basically the community. So that was a very big and I would say a bold decision that was made by the management to create that Falcon Foundation. Second, we think that, of course, as Reda said, it's not basically anti-commercial, anti-business. With Linux, you had Red Hat, you had Ubuntu. AI71 for us is one of the few companies which is going to be building in the world, basically in a success, just like Red Hat, by packaging, working with customers, understanding, and the value is exactly in the use cases and the kind of close interaction they have with the different businesses with which they're working. And we are also very supportive of having much more companies, and that's how we think it's going to go forward, using Falcon and then bringing back also their knowledge within the Falcon Foundation. I think it's quite unique. When you look at Meta and others, you have a single company behind, just taking. We think that building a foundation with a community behind is the best way to have a sustainable model in the long run.
And I assume that's a global foundation, and I'll get to the global issues in a second. But this gives us a sense, at least, about first of all how you build the whole Falcon, and then eventually AI71, and also how you think about the strategy to compete in this global landscape, which will be concentrated. At least that's what your view is. There will be a consolidation going forward. Can I go back to the big picture of the UAE AI strategy? And you talked a lot about this, Reda, already. But I want to do a deep dive, maybe do a bit broader question about, what are some elements of the UAE AI strategy, especially when it comes, for example, around also talent and compute, but also other aspects you think are critical on making this work over the long term. Maybe we can do also a deep dive in compute in a second. Just give us a broad view of the AI national AI strategy of UAE, and then we can do deep dives on compute.
Well, I think what talks for the UAE is really the action that it took in the domain of AI, not only setting a strategy and announcing certain objectives and so on, but I think the UAE has one of the most comprehensive and coordinated efforts when it comes to AI. When you look into the ingredients of AI, from talent to data to compute to research to actually commercial applications, you will actually find that in the UAE, in the last 18 months or so, there has been massive efforts into each of these ingredients. And this actually talks by itself, and it shows how the UAE wants actually to play a driver role when it comes to AI. Actually doubling down in research, making it an open source, making the output open source is one of the bold actions as well that the UAE has taken. Lining up all government entities in one group to actually articulate their use cases and be actually proactive into finding AI solutions. Today, as AI71, we are actually overwhelmed with requests of entities and industry players here in the UAE wanting actually to explore what we can do with AI. I talked about our vertical solutions before, but we do have also advisory and custom solution services where we are actually today overwhelmed. We are not able to cater for all the requests that come our way. What this says, and Merouane touched based on it, is there is a room for actually more than a player. And this is why as AI71, what we actually did as well is we launched a few months back a startups program where we are actually backing startups that want to come here to the UAE, backing them with compute and supporting them actually into establishing their operations here and benefiting from this ecosystem. What we did as well in the use case perspective, because as you said before, we can tackle 3 sectors, we can tackle maybe 10 and so on. But in reality, there are so many interesting use cases that are out there that we can't tackle as one entity. So last summer, we launched the call for proposal where we called actually small and medium enterprises and universities to actually propose their their proposals and use cases, and we would back the best of them in terms of compute. With very minimal communication effort, we've actually received more than 1,500 applications. What that said is actually the UAE is perceived as the place that has the right ingredients and that is moving forward when it comes to implementation of AI, not only setting strategies.
So it's very systemic, very commercial oriented, very open and collaborative, or open source ecosystem, community based. Quick question for you: all those things are doable based on, you need compute, right? And the compute nowadays, we all know about, one of the biggest companies in the world, third by now, maybe it's second, I don't know, I didn't see the stock market today. I'm sure it's getting there, NVIDIA. And there is a lot of geopolitics around this. This is another big elephant that I'm sure everybody in the audience and is interested to hear about the views of UAE on how these geopolitics play in your AI strategy. How do you see this potentially impacting? Is it a risk for you? China, US, there was, we read a lot about in the news about the Microsoft investment, about the US kind of limits and, kind of forcing potentially in different ways the disconnect from China. Whatever you can say here, I'm not sure what you can share. How are these discussions in UAE? What does it mean practically as a risk or as an opportunity maybe to bypass it in different ways for research and commercialization and for the overall AI strategy of the country and also for Falcon, the compute and geopolitics? I don't know who wants to take this. Is it an opportunity? Is it a risk? What can you tell us some color of what's the discussions?
I think as far as we are concerned, we are a research organization and the commercial entity doing AI and selling solutions. So all we focus on is delivering value, delivering technology with actually in mind an open-minded collaboration spirit where we want to collaborate and we find the right partner for the right thing. Now, if we focus on compute, I think the country has taken a bold hybrid approach that actually does a very good balance between setting up its own infrastructure but also striking impressive deals with hyperscalers and large global entities to also secure compute capacity there.
Okay, that's clear. Merouane, last question, then we'll go to some questions from the audience. I'd like to step back a little, go back to a little bit of the, not only the safety, but also in general, the kind of research happening. Let's switch completely gears. We covered a bit about your history, the Falcon history, the AI strategy of the UAE, the competition, the competitive strategy of AI71 and of Falcon, the ecosystem, all those topics. But I want to go now back before we close and go to the open to the audience questions, a bit about technology and research.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a few exciting research areas your team, others are working on these days, and what are some open questions going forward?
Yeah, so first of all, we're continuing, first of all, the classical trend, which is happening this year. And we made already an announcement when we released Falcon a couple of weeks ago on the fact that we'll be releasing in a few weeks a mixture of experts related to the 11B that we made. And I think that's extremely important because, of course, this gives the capability of having a super, I would say, powerful model to be run on basically less GPUs that is needed. So that's a first, I would say, kind of work that we're continuing in terms of progressing. Second is we are dedicated, of course, to providing to basically AI-71, but the different, I would say, stakeholders who want to take those models and play with them, the capability to play with those models with inference costs, which are very low. And that's by building small models, which are extremely powerful. When I mean small models,
sorry, Debbah, because you mentioned earlier on that part of the trick is also the balance between iterations, quality of data, and algorithms.
Yeah.
Okay?
So yeah, the idea
iterations part, if you can, I don't know what you can share here. What's part of the trick to make it work?
Well, here, what you do is that you're going to build much better data sets, which goes beyond basically the 10 trillion tokens. So it's roughly the size that people talk about today. And with models, which are within the range, I would say, of 1B to, let's say, 70B. So that's the kind of range that this year we want to work on, and which we're of course embracing what people are doing, because those are the kinds of how you can use them, and usage of those models with reducing the cost of them in terms of how you do inference is extremely important for our community. The third one also is all the multimodality aspects. I think you've been seeing multimodality is becoming extremely important in terms of vision, in terms of course videos, and all these voice, and all these multimodalities of course are empowering our system. Now that's, I would say, is this trend. On the next front, of course, we're still working on breakthrough technologies on going what we call on beyond GPT architecture. So this is the kind of work we've been putting our teams on. Nearly all the models which are released, I would say this year, I mean, since 2 years, but also this year, are based on this famous paper of 2017 called Attention is All You Need, where basically they developed what we call the transformer architectures, and everybody has been using it. But we think, of course, that other venues are extremely important because, again, these models consume a lot on how they're trained. They have big issues, and I think we didn't talk about it, but of course, powering data centers that can sustain these models on the long run is a big issue today. You have to know in the US, typically, some states are not enabling anymore new data centers to be developed because of the fact that there's energy shortage. So there's a need, of course, on coming up with new ideas on beyond GPT architectures like space state models, but are the other very interesting ideas that I cannot develop here on which we're working, which are extremely important on this beyond GPT type of domain.
So beyond transformers, you mean?
Beyond transformer, yes.
So we should be expecting probably some new architecture coming out. That has been like a question. I mean, I guess one can predict that at some point there will be, but your guess is that we will be seeing some new architectures coming out beyond transformers within the next 12 to 24 months in general in the world. No, I'm not saying only from your lab.
Of course. I mean, already there's been some architectures like the Mamba architecture, which is a space state models on which people are working. And we're seeing here some mixtures that people are building between RNN type and transformer. So yeah, you'll be seeing, and especially with the need today of coming with more and more what we call energy efficient architecture. Same thing that goes on, we didn't talk about it, on the capability of these models. And I think for customers that Reda is serving today, there's a big need of having what we call inference costs, which are being reduced, on also architectures, either which are specialized or not. And running Falcon on those type of architecture is also some work that we're doing today, which is very important from the feedback that we're getting.
Yeah, just for the audience, you mentioned inference costs. You mean the cost when somebody is using, not the training. And you mentioned RNN. This is a precursor of the transformer, recurrent neural networks, much a precursor, which is a lot faster from, I assume, to train, lot cheaper to train, probably. I don't know, it depends on how many iterations, what else you do in training, I guess, also, and the data. But it's probably a lot faster, correct?
Yeah, so for people who are not specialists, there's 2 steps when you build these models. The first one is the training. We've been focusing on that. But the second is serving. And serving is whenever you do a prompt, what you write on your interface, you get a result. So every time you write something, then of course it triggers some compute. And of course, these are extremely important to reduce the cost, because eventually when you have 100 million customers or depending, then of course the bill goes up. And second, of course, when you do that, there's also the need to get the result very fast. And in general, you have what we call a context window, meaning that usually you're not putting like 2 lines, you're putting a huge document, finance document, which is like 300 pages. And you want the result not to take an hour, but 1. But these are examples are still, like, I would say, in the realm of something that is not so difficult. What we're talking about difficult is generating a video, for example. You do a text to video, a video you want to generate, well, it can take you hours to generate. And that needs to go fast and reduce the cost of all these kind of use cases that we are starting to see from the people who are using our model.
Thanks, Merouane. Let's switch. We have 10 more minutes. I'd like to switch to some questions from the audience. We have a bunch of them. I'll take them as a little bit in an order. So there's a question about, you can also see them in the Q&A, everybody, the whole audience. How can open source AI enable a fair and equal access to AI around the globe, especially in developing countries, to bridge a digital gap? I mean, we saw at the beginning, I love this question because we saw at the beginning how most of the audience voted that the English-speaking models would be more powerful, giving an advantage to English-speaking cultures. So this question relates to that. What's your take about supporting developing countries and equal and fair access across the globe to AI, open source AI? How do we ensure this? Any comments on this?
So, I mean, Reda can take it or I can take it. Of course, I think our experience now, we're getting a lot of questions from many countries approaching us on explaining how we did and how we went forward. And the thing that we're seeing is the following. The first thing is, of course, building foundational models from the start is huge cost. So many countries don't have the capability, but they have certainly the capability of what we call basically fine-tuning those models within their languages, meaning build a model in Serbian, build a model in a specific language like Portuguese or whatever. And there, what you need is a fine-tuning capability of those models. And so from that point of view, basically, we have decided, of course, within our foundation, just to give, of course, the model as open source, but also supporting those people, basically, and those communities with compute. And so we have two things which we have launched, is what we call an ambassador program. That ambassador program basically leverages a lot of top universities within different countries around the world in supporting them in developing some use cases. And also when people come with some projects which are open source and have an impact on society, we're also supporting those projects. And that's the way we're doing to, of course, leverage on the open source, because open source is not like Linux, meaning you need compute. With Linux, people are contributing just with a computer. You know, you just had a computer, you go, and then you send the code, and that's it. Here, you need to go and set a step and also provide the compute of that community. And that's the kind of things that the Falcon Foundation has decided to implement.
So that's part of the answer part of the answer to the question is also an answer to the question, how do we support equal and fair access to compute power around the world? Because at the end, without that, you cannot train, you cannot fine-tune, you cannot, well, train, forget about this, let's say you do the training, but fine-tune or use at scale for different applications.
So the person who asked that question, maybe a small comment, he's talking about countries, but you have to know that we have already those requests from universities. The top professors in many universities are going out from universities because they don't have the environment anymore to do their research in terms of that. And that's something also strategically that we took in the Falcon Foundation in saying, we need to keep the best minds in universities because they are the one who can improve the models in the open source realm. And to do that, we need to give them the environment. So within the Falcon Foundation, the ambassador program was meant exactly to solve that problem.
Yeah, you probably are familiar with this, Merouane. That's like a big question and debate in academic institutions these days. What is the role of academic institutions in research in AI, given the costs, and how's the split done between academia and industry? It's a fascinating question and broader question. Reda, something to add on this equal fair access to AI and compute around the world, or maybe we can take another question around the second question. Just you can choose whatever you like around establishing, and what's the role of the UAE in this, on establishing global standards and governance for open source, but also in general for AI in the world. Maybe we can see a little bit about, if you have visibility on the standards and governance of AI.
Well, I'll touch base on both. I think in the first one, Professor Merouane has addressed it. I think other than building the Falcon Foundation itself and inviting others to be part of Falcon, we've also established the number of agreements that we announced in the latest World Government Summit here in Dubai with a number of countries where we are actually bringing our expertise to the table in conjunction to their use cases and data, and planning with them to either build a model for their specific languages or fine-tune Falcon for that, and so on and so forth. So we are playing actually a key enabler role as well to a number of countries to enable them also to get into AI.
Quick question here, Reda, and both of you maybe you can share, if you can, right? Is there what countries, what geographies are we talking about mostly? Is there some concentration in general, or it's like more across the board? I
No,
mean,
there is no
beginning,
specific concentration. I guess in the World Government Summit, for example, we've announced it, but we signed with Brazil, we signed with Uzbekistan, we signed with Serbia. So I think you can clearly see that it's a bit. We are open to collaborate with countries who want to be part of this journey, and we have a lot to bring to the table. We believe these countries have also a lot to bring to the table. They have talent, they have data, and so on and so forth. So we are keen to enable that journey. Now, on the standards and regulation perspective,
governance. Yeah.
the AI ministry here in the UAE has been super active in driving that agenda at the global stage. I've seen the AI minister travel pretty much everywhere to discuss actually what should be the regulation framework and the standards and so on. The AI ministry is super active, and we are supporting actually also as TII wherever we feel we are needed and wherever we are pulled to actually contribute to this discussion, because we are also you've mentioned the safety issues and the concerns in the beginning of the call. I think one, we need definitely to double down when it comes to safety and security development, but we need also to make sure that the right standards and regulations are set so that the right LLMs are used and so on. So UAE is playing a role, and I think the AI ministry is the one leading the front on this.
Thanks a lot. There is a quick question, actually, quick, if you have the answer. I was thinking about Googling it or whatever, LLM, Falconing it. Has someone calculated how much energy will be used to support AI worldwide? I don't know if you have an answer to this. I mean, I'm just curious. If you have top of mind, I don't, but maybe you have a sense.
So we haven't calculated that. I think this is a very interesting question that needs to continue. However, this is, from my point of view, from more a research standpoint, what we call the next winter of AI. When you look at the last 10 years of disruptive technologies that we've been building, call it blockchain, call it basically Bitcoins, call it basically the new LLMs, we have, of course, basically looking at more what we call brute force approaches. What it means that compute was at the heart of this huge progress. And we see basically, and I was talking about this beyond GPT architecture, the need to come up with mixing more and more, I would say, techniques which are related to analytical stuff to be able to come up with energy efficient techniques. So beyond the factor that we didn't calculate that and needs to be calculated, we know that we're facing a wall, and that wall is the energy wall. Energy because of the cost of these models. You saw the prices, how much it costs to train beyond the GPU. And second, we are not able to progress anymore if we don't spend more time in terms of digging into more research in new types of architectures and methods, which enable to do same thing as we are as a brain. With a brain, you're not consuming that much to do your stuff. So it means that there is a large margin of progress foreseen for us.
We have 2 minutes, just closing remarks. UAE is playing a pretty amazing game, and so you too and your teams in the global AI race. Global AI race is around, US, UAE, Singapore, China, Europe, Israel, you name it, everywhere, many countries. Any lessons so far to close? Any comments on the AI race so far from lessons from you as a last comment? Maybe Reda, we start with you, and then Merouane, last comment from you.
Yeah, well, maybe from my side, first, I think what at least we take from it is that small teams and small, relatively, countries can punch way above their weights when it comes to technology. I think AI is actually the right environment and context for countries like the UAE to prove themselves and to actually leverage all what has been built so far. We are seeing the fruits of it now. And second, I guess, is collaboration is key for success. I think from our side, we see collaboration as a key component of anything we can do in the future, whether it's in the research where we have more than 100 universities we are collaborating with, or in the commercial aspect where we are actually partners with consulting firms, we are partners with hyperscalers, we are partners with end users, and so on and so forth. So I think collaboration will be at the heart of AI success.
Collaboration, and small countries can punch above their weight. Merouane, last one, we are just on the clock. Any last one comment?
Yeah, I think Reda mentioned the two main lessons. I would say that the last lesson is also the platform and openness that the UAE has been bringing in terms of attracting talents. I think talent, as we know, is key today in this race. And this race, basically, you can make a difference when you're able to attract those talents. And those talents, basically, you have different ways of doing it. Of course, you can go on the salary front, but openness and the fact that you can bring in a region so many diverse nationalities and talents that we're seeing today has been, from my point of view, a big, basically, milestone in the progress that we've been able to do. And this thing is still going on at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of great talents, a lot of great companies now coming here in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE more general, because of this kind of I would say, environment, which is basically business friendly, but also research friendly, but also this openness that people are looking for.
We are 1 minute past. It was great to hear from both of you about what UAE is doing, what Falcon is doing, what AI71 is doing, which is part of the global AI progress these years. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Don't forget the next webinar is actually next week in this series. Have a good afternoon, evening, morning, everybody, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.